Hi everyone, Hirsch Shah here, reporting from Auckland as usual, as always. Hopefully not forever though. And today is the 10th of April 2024. And today on this topic, or for this talk video, a very, very interesting one. I know I say that probably too much 90% of the time, but I really do think this is a very, very interesting one. And certainly one that interests many people is the supernatural, delving into the supernatural and supernatural things or supernatural topics, a bit like spirituality. I know, of course, people tend to have very almost one-sided opinions on them. Either they truly believe in it or they don't believe in it at all. They think it's just all rubbish. A lot like sort of horror movies. Have you ever noticed that? Like, well, at least in my opinion or from my experience, horror movies tend to be either really, really good or really, really not so good. It's one thing I found with horror movies. It's yeah, But anyway, coming back to the main topic, the thing with supernatural phenomena or supernatural topics, what I truly think, based on my own if you like, research into it, reading about it, watching things on TV shows about it, documentaries, and just thinking about it myself. And to be honest, even some of my own experiences, which is probably nothing too great, but just some, experiences I've had. I do admit that, I might remember them wrongly or I might have misinterpreted something. But based on all of that, I would say that probably a lot of supernatural stuff we hear probably isn't really that accurate, or probably is. You could almost just go as far as saying complete rubbish. I'm not sure about witches riding broomsticks at the top of the sky, high in the sky, or fairies at the bottom of the garden. I'm not too sure about those things, but there are some things that actually do almost defy explanation, and which really even leave the most, how do you put it, the most unemotional skeptics among us. They can even leave them, scratching their heads and just wondering, pondering. Um, a good example though about something which is supernatural, which was thought to be supernatural, but later was confirmed to be completely different and scientifically proven. And I want to mention this because this could happen with a lot of sorry, excuse me, a lot of supernatural phenomena. Just as as we gain more knowledge and as we find out more about the world around us, obviously, we do discover, if you like, new facts. And yeah, we simply learn more about everything around us. But a very good example of something which was once thought as completely supernatural but which is now confirmed as not and fully scientifically proven, is, of course, the mental illness of schizophrenia or multiple personalities. Back in the Middle Ages, when people exhibited that behavior, multiple personalities, and people didn't really know much about mental illnesses, they thought that they were possessed by demons. It's very interesting, and I remember once thinking to myself that back in those days, say two people arguing about the existence of God, one person could have said, "Oh, consider this. That person is clearly possessed by demons. If demons exist, well, therefore the devil exists. And if the devil exists, obviously God exists." And maybe back in those days, that could have been seen as a very strong argument. Not saying that God does not exist, of course. He could still exist for completely different reasons. But it's interesting how people interpreted these things back then, and of course now we know today that schizophrenia, the mental illness, has absolutely nothing to do with being possessed by demons or anything. It's completely different. It's the balance of chemicals in your brain, and that's of course why people who suffer from that mental illness take meds to to balance those chemicals in the brain in the hope to maybe not cure their schizophrenia, but dumb it down hugely, just like with many other mental illnesses. So that's a very interesting one to think. People once thought that those with schizophrenia were actually possessed by demons. They, if you like, they knew it, but now we know that it's something completely different. But then again, some supernatural phenomena you can never quite just explain away. I know you can say things like, say, people who take who, if you like, come up with proof or evidence of certain supernatural phenomena. For example, people who take pictures and show that there are ghosts in the background, or spirit photography, any kind of spirit photography. Maybe it is proof that spirits exist, but then again, of course, it could have been faked in one way or another. Of course, very easily done today, with the IT technology that is available to most of us. But even back in the day, if you're going back, say many decades, even close to a century, sometimes it could have, even in those days, things could have actually been faked. Photography, it was certainly much harder, but it could have actually have been faked. So, but still, some things just do defy explanation. Like, for example, if it's something like where many people see it at the same time, or when they do take photos of it, and those photos just cannot be falsified at all. So it's that, even if it's a small percentage of all the supernatural phenomena around us, it's that small percentage that, again, like I said before, leaves you scratching your head, even if you are a very unemotional, objective skeptic. And again, there are just some things that really do defy explanation. And one of my favorite examples is curses, and it's because they just seem so absurd to think that someone could actually say something. It's like, from this day forth, you will never achieve this, or you will always suffer from that. To think that someone could actually say something and then it actually has an everlasting effect on someone else. And but yet there is actually some evidence of curses, if you like, actually holding or being true, at least in some aspect. Probably the oops, excuse, that's a family member's phone going off. I hope it doesn't ring. But a very good example is, Egyptian treasure, where people who have raided pyramids, and who've even got managed to get past all the endless booby traps and dangers to reach the treasure and manage to get it and even go home. You hear all sorts of very, very odd stories of things happening to them and them dying or suffering hugely after that, as if the spirit of those Egyptian pharaohs who were perhaps buried in the pyramids literally thousands of years ago, as if those spirits are haunting them or getting revenge for, those people stealing what is really still their treasure. And there is actually a lot of that. And to be honest, like, if I ever came across Egyptian treasure and it was even mine for the taking, I wouldn't take any of it, nothing, because it is stealing. Really, if you think about it, even after thousands of years, it belongs to someone else. It doesn't belong to you. It's not the same as just finding money on the street. Um, so that's one good, interesting example. There was also the example of the Kennedys. I think, if I remember correctly, a curse was put on them at some point, and many members of the family, suffered very, a lot of trouble, even deaths. Like, we had the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and also on his brother Robert F. Kennedy, who I think also tried to at one point run for president. And then I think there was that plane crash. If I actually remember, I think it was August 1999. I think one of the family died in that plane crash. Just things like that. Despite the family being, very wealthy and seeming to have pretty much everything. Um, that's another one. One curse which I actually found very, very interesting, and it's also because it concerns the very country that I'm from, New Zealand. Is one that, to be honest, seriously leaves me scratching my head. I just can't think of any way to explain it, and neither can many other experts and historians. And I must say, just please, just sort of excuse. I admit that what I'm talking about here with this particular curse is something, it's just purely a reflection of what I've heard about and what I've read. So of course, it may not be completely true. Just keep that in mind. It may even be falsified, and later on, if it's proven to be untrue, what we thought was true at first. So, but it still sort of makes you think. But when the British came and discovered New Zealand, I think it was in the late 1700s, around there. This was actually after Abel Tasman had first discovered the country, I think earlier in the 1700s, and he was one who had actually sailed all around Australia without even realizing it. After leaving Southeast Asia, and he arrived in New Zealand, and he sailed between the North and South Islands, and he arrived in what is today the harbour of the capital city, Wellington. And he actually saw the natives at the time on the land, who were the indigenous people of New Zealand, known as the Maoris. He saw them, but he didn't land. He didn't actually claim the country or the land. And some historians say it's interesting, because had he actually claimed it, and had the Dutch gone forward with that claim and colonized the land, today in New Zealand would be speaking Dutch, rather than English, because obviously there was a British who ended up colonizing the country, and of course that's what brought the English language to the country. So Abel Tasman didn't claim even land in New Zealand. He just continued onwards. But when the British discovered New Zealand, I think later in the 1700s, there was, of course, the indigenous people already there, hundreds of thousands of them spread throughout the country, in their various tribes. And they were a people who, were very, very rich in their culture, which of course you can still see today. And it's without a doubt a huge advantage of New Zealand. We have something that no one else has, the Maori people and the unique culture and everything they have to offer, which is obviously a lot. And they're sort of people that value things that really should be valued, such as family and love and all that. Um, so basically, when the British came and when they found New Zealand and they just decided to colonize it, and they created what the founding document for the country, known as the Treaty of Waitangi. They call it Waitangi because it was signed in a place called Waitangi in New Zealand, and that was done in on the 6th of February 1840. Basically, it was a very short treaty, believe it or not, a very simple short treaty, nothing like, say, the American Constitution, but it was only one page, 3 paragraphs. And you can see a big, huge copy of it in our National Museum, Te Papa, located in Wellington, the capital of New Zealand. It was only 3 paragraphs, and it was basically saying that both the British and the Maoris would live together and pretty much, share the land, but they would live together in peace and harmony and move forwards, despite them being two very different people, or if you like, two different cultures. And again, it's still a bit unclear today, but what we've basically, been told, what we've basically been taught, what we've basically heard is that there were huge differences between the English and Maori translations of the treaty, and some believe that the British might have actually done that on purpose to mislead the Maori so they could basically take as much of the land as they could. And what I've heard, coming again back to supernatural phenomena and curses, and again, just be careful because what I'm talking about, might be falsified one day. And again, it's just based on what I've heard and what I've read. So it's not really something to quote me on 100%. But what I have heard and what I've read is that once the treaty was signed by the Governor William Hobson, the Queen of England, and an estimated 500 Maori chiefs of probably what would have been about 500 Maori tribes in the country at the time. Once it was signed, and the Maoris were pretty much, arguably, really cheated out of their land. A lot of land was just taken from them, confiscated, if you like. Some was bought from them, like the city of Auckland was actually bought from the Maoris in exchange for goods. But a lot of land, a lot of territory was just basically taken from them. And what I've heard is that one Maori chief actually stood up. It's interesting, there's always that one person who stands up amongst the rest and actually stands up for for everything. And he had said to the British, "Okay, look, you've just come here, you've tricked us with this treaty, you've shown no respect for our culture, our way of life, our people. You've just basically killed half of us, including some people very dear to me. You've taken our land, you've taken our everything, and." Okay, we can't fight you. We don't have the technology that you have. We can't fight you. But what I will do is put a very heavy curse on this land, a very very intense, powerful curse on this land. So from now on, won't do anything to you. That sort of concept, that that thing which we might have heard before. I won't do anything to you. I'll do it to your children and their children and their children. He said, and this Maori chief said that from now on, children born here in this land, this whole land, New Zealand, will never be happy. And you seem to talk about wealth and technology as if that's all you value, whereas we value different things, like people, culture, love, family, things that matter, if you like, the land, being in harmony with the land. But he said that from hereby forth, children born in this land will never be happy. In fact, the more wealth and technology that you value so much, the more wealth and technology you give them, the more unhappy they will be. And I would have probably assumed that the British might have just laughed in their face, saying, "Oh, wow, so what? Who cares? Do 10 of your little curses. We don't care. We've got your land, and we're going to make an unbelievable, immeasurable, fortune developing it, exploiting it. And if you're in New Zealand, just look out the window." They certainly did. But it just so happens, interestingly enough, that since then, New Zealand has the highest youth suicide rate in the world, and they just can't explain why, especially being such a wealthy, very affluent country, a first world country, quite advanced and absolutely stunning, beautiful, very clean and green, but we've got the highest youth suicide rate in the world. We've got some of the highest levels of depression, and they just can't explain it. Some people have posed that maybe it's because of the drinking culture. Well, you could argue that, but then again, you look at the Irish and the Russians, they drink more than we do in New Zealand, and they don't have the same rates of, youth suicide and depression. Some people say it's because of maybe abuse. Well, if you like abuse at home or child abuse, unfortunately, that's everywhere, isn't it? So they'd maybe not explain it away. Still, that does not mean that the curse is true, but it's just one of those things you just can't help but wonder. Just why are so many young people, especially born in New Zealand, living in New Zealand, just suffer from depression, and the youth suicide rate being the highest in the world. When really you'd think that the country has so much to offer. There's even free help, free therapy. There's just so much of help. There's so much of support. There's so many resources. But yeah, that seems to be the truth. And it's just, again, I'll say it again, doesn't mean that the curse is true. This might even be a made up story. It might have no place in history at all. It might have never even happened. But it's just one of those things you can't help but wonder. So sort of coming to the point, and I've already rattled on, but a lot of supernatural phenomena probably really doesn't have much to it or much to back it up. I'll say it again, I'm really not sure about witches riding broomsticks at the top of the sky or fairies at the bottom of the garden. But some things, you can't help but wonder, and some things which you just can't explain, or even which there seems to be a lot of hard evidence for. Again, you just can't help but wonder. Another favorite of mine is spirits and reincarnation. And I've already touched on spirits a bit, but there is a lot of spirit photography or people who have seen spirits or called them on video, more than one person, sometimes even huge groups of people. And again, people can try to explain away some of the photography, maybe even most of it, but there's still a few bits and pieces here and there that just defy explanation. Who knows? This is just a guess by me. A little bit like that talk about schizophrenia. People thought it was others were possessed by demons. Those who had schizophrenia were possessed by demons, and now we know it's a mental illness caused by something completely different. But this is just a guess by me. Maybe life, as we know, or life is just some form of energy, or matter, or just really some sort of energy wave, whatever you like, that just simply transcends from one body to another, when a life is over. And that would immediately explain both spirits and reincarnation. And on reincarnation, again, there are actually a lot of stories of reincarnation where children, very young children who are only a few years old, or say less than 5 or 6 years old, they will recall uncanny facts from basically a previous life. And sometimes their parents or investigators have checked it out, and it's unbelievable just how accurate it could have been. It's like something as small as like, oh, I was this person in my previous life, and I always kept my cup on this side of the cupboard of my kitchen cupboards, something, that specific or personal. And they've checked it out. Not only did that person exist, but those facts were true. And again, reincarnation. I just wonder. I just don't really think you can dismiss it so easily, because there really is a lot of, pretty much from what I see, hard evidence for it. But then again, one day we might actually find out, like we did with schizophrenia, or people who assume that those who had it were possessed by demons. One day we might find out that maybe that is what life is. Some form of energy or wave or what have you, that simply passes from one body to the other as it ends a life and begins another, and therefore that immediately would explain both spirits and reincarnation. Who knows? And we might even find that is actually something scientific, as opposed to, say, religious or spiritual. And then of course we would approve that one. It's a little bit like, some people who can communicate through telepathy, especially people who are very close to each other, like mothers and children, or, basically family members. You've heard of twins who, when one twin, say, was injured or experienced a lot of pain, which could have been literally hundreds of kilometers or miles away, suddenly the other twin experienced it at the same time. Those sort of things really are truly fascinating. Um, or somehow they found each other even when they were both lost, and they just managed to find each other, things like that. And again, it could actually be something scientific, some way of communicating from one person to the other, especially if they're close. which again we might figure out later on, But then again, who knows? I guess for now, and probably for a lot of time, maybe even always, there's always some parts of supernatural phenomena, that we'll never quite explain. But I guess we can continue to theorize. We can continue, of course, we should always continue to investigate to find out what we can. We may never quite get there, but we can always get closer and closer and closer. And that's definitely something I really believe we should continue doing. But as for, supernatural phenomena, hopefully at least based on what you've seen in this video, it really is something that I think should not be dismissed so easily, especially if you're talking about all of it. Maybe most of it can be, but not quite all of it. And yeah, hopefully that's something that really makes you think. Thank you.